What's going on, y'all? And welcome to the Bud Elliott College Football Lunch Break. I'm the poll assassin. Get it? That was pretty fun last night on Twitter. You guys just drop in the chat what you want to talk about, and we will go ahead and have fun talking about college football. Tonight is the first night of the college football playoff rankings. Be sure to check out the Cover 3 podcast as we do our live reaction show on that. Have a couple other things planned if we need to kill some time here and take up y'all's lunch break. Really appreciate you spending it with us. But, I mean, I think we have to start with what happened yesterday because I really thought that Dan Mullen botching that easy recruiting question in his press conference and looking around like, SID, why did you let this guy ask me a innocuous question about recruiting? And then hitting him with the next question and cutting him off and then ending the press conference early and then Florida killing the rest of their media availability. I thought that might be the story of the day. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe it'll be Gary Patterson's firing / quitting could be the story of the day. And yet, no, it was a different story in Texas. It was a story that harken back to the old days of Twitter. I think there are not a whole lot of days on Twitter like last night. I remember the Tennessee butt chugging incident. If you guys were on Twitter back in like 2011-ish, that was pretty hilarious. Urban Meyer in the bar was certainly a pretty good Twitter day. And there's been a couple like this. You know, this was pretty interesting. So there's a tweet that goes out that says basically somebody got bit by a monkey, a trick-or-treater, and okay. If that's all there is, nothing really comes of it. And we were going to do an emergency episode on this, but we couldn't get enough people together for it. However, the owner, possessor, whatever of the monkey, who turns out to be an emotional support monkey, okay, ends up tweeting a whole bunch of stuff, assuming that the Twitter account that was tweeting was actually connected to the person who owns the monkey. And allegedly this person is somehow connected as well to Texas special teams coach Jeff Banks. Yes, people weighing in the chat, this was sort of a Petrino level day as well. Yeah, for sure. That was another really good old school Twitter day. And I don't know if I can recap this whole thing because I'm not even sure I saw everything, but I did see the video, not of the bite, the video of the tour of the home. I did see the multiple back and forths with PFT commenter, which were just fantastic. And it was pretty epic. At some point, though, somebody pulled the plug on the Twitter account. I don't know how that went down. How do you handle that if you're Steve Sarkisian, right? It's like, okay. And then we found the Jerry Springer episode, which was also pretty interesting. Although it was anticlimactic because if you look at the IMDb page for the Springer episode, it says pole assassin, very famous internet pole dancer, or pole performer or something like that, is going to have to pick between two fans. All right. Okay. Now I thought, oh wait, she's going to pick like somebody to date between two fans. No, it was actually two separate pole dancers who wanted to be more like pole assassin. And ultimately, she picked one of them. So it was it was not very exciting once I actually saw the video from Springer, but this story just has all kind of layers. And this stuff doesn't happen in the NFL, but I feel like it doesn't happen nearly as much. And college football is just so wonky. I mean, we picked Tennessee Ole Miss for our game of the month because you had people throwing golf balls on the field and Lane Kiffin throwing his visor into the stands and just having an absolute blast. People in the comment section are a little more certain as to the relationship and the events and all this kind of stuff. I work for a media company that is like, pretty mainstream. So I'm not going to say for sure if folks are dating or not. I don't know if they're currently dating or that status. I haven't verified that. I haven't verified that it's her account. So that's why I couched that as I did. Y'all in the comment section are free to make the assumptions that you did. But last night was pretty crazy. I have a couple people here who want to talk a little bit of Maction. We can do that. So I had somebody ask me, Alex Marshall says, it's Monkey Gate first for sure, but then we got to talk about what happened to this Akron line. Well, yeah, let's do talk about that. I'm on Akron, and Circa opened Akron at 20. I haven't seen a whole lot of movement on that. The total though has gone slightly up. Akron got bet initially, and then it looks like Ball State got bet again. Am I missing something? Did this kind of wheel back around and do something crazy, or is my screen just not showing me what I need to say? So if you're still in the chat, Alex, let me know about that. Let me see here. I'm gonna pull up another book that's not it's not on screen to see if I can pull a history off this. 57 and a half, 20 and a half. I'm still holding form, or still holding my Akron position there. What's up with RLM on the Western Michigan, Central Michigan total? RLM. I'm not even sure. Am I missing something? Sorry, it's been a bit of a busy day, and obviously a late night following all of the of the stuff there. That was pretty incredible. Oh man, it looks like FSU is going to have to shut down media access for the week because Mike Norvell was asked a question about recruiting. So that's, reverse line movement. I don't really follow reverse line movement, to be frank. I know it's a thing, but here's the deal. There are groups that pump fake these games. I actually know a couple of these groups. By pump fake them, I mean they will go and they will purposefully bet the game on screen, which means like your major offshore books that a lot of the bookies that have these paperhead sites, Easy Action or any of those types. And then those paperhead, bookie run sites will then use their auto mover, or some of them still manually do it, which is crazy. And they will move in response to what the major, onshore or major offshore books, what they moved it to. So when that happens, okay, a group has spent, I don't know, $50K to move that line to where they want it. Then all the paperhead shops that they have and all their bookie sites that they have are moving in addition. So they're setting up a better number at those sites. And then they come back over the top and hit it with like 10x or 12x of what they paid to move that number. For instance, let's say that Pinnacle or Chris or whatever has 56 on a game. Okay, I'm going to go hit that with part of my group. We're going to move that to 57 and a half. Then at home, we have all your bookies, right? Then all of a sudden it's 57 and a half. Some might even move to 58 to try to get ahead of the steam. Then I'm going to fire a whole lot on under 58 and a half or 58 there, because that's the number I actually want. So I paid a little to kind of rig the market to get the number in a position that I want. And then because I run some huge gambling group, I'm saying in theory, I do not actually run a huge group. I'm just a regular media guy. Then I can get the number I want and set it up. So when I talk about a head fake or a pump fake in regards to a line, that's what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Like, I know that's really in the weeds and I'm hoping I'm not losing y'all, but sometimes I totally understand why lines are moving. Sometimes it's a group release that is a head fake. I got people who will text me and like, I think this is a head fake. I'm not buying this. I don't see the fundamentals for this. Other groups where there are good groups out there that are pay services, and some of them are having good years, and some of them are getting their butts kicked. I'm fortunate to be having a really good year this year, but I know I'm not quite as good as the results I'm having this year. I think I'm good. I know I'm plus EV, but I'm not. Like, there's obviously some positive variance, and I'm running hot as well this year. Sometimes those groups will have a huge following, will release a number. Obviously, you guys have heard of like Dr. Bob and whatnot. If you have a huge guy like that drops something out, then that will sometimes if they're having a good year, move the market as well. But I'm sticking with my position in that game too. Hold on. You guys ever like type the first couple letters of a spreadsheet you want to pull up into your browser, and you actually have a couple of spreadsheets that are labeled pretty similar, and it doesn't pull up the right one? That's what I just did. So I have duplicate spreadsheets open. Yeah, guys, sure, we can do this. I don't think I'm going to, give away the farm on this. Sam Johnson and Taylor Williams and a couple other people have asked, "Hey, can you talk about your primary live betting strategies?" Sure, I don't see why not. If you guys follow the Bud's Bets column, that is where I put the live bets. Live bets have been good for me here this season. Actually, really, really good. But again, you got to get them quickly. That's why I break out my against the spread record and my live betting record, and also my, money line record and my futures record, because I feel like transparency there is important. You know what I mean? I could just pump a bunch of live. Like I know my live ROI is going to be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, so far this year, my live ROI and stuff that I've actually had the time to post up is 25%. Are you actually getting that? If you're following me in the thread, I think you're getting a piece of that. I think you're certainly positive, but like obviously lines move, so that's why I break it out. I don't want to be that guy that's like misleading there. Some live betting strategies. Yeah, a couple things. One, I like to always keep in mind what the original line was. Which is really important, because most of the time you are not getting an actual human who is putting numbers up, right? It's too fast. These books subscribe to services who are basically going to take some data, and sometimes it's real simple data. It's like yards, score, time left, maybe timeouts left, and different operators have different providers, right? For instance, I know Pinnacle is taking big bets on the NFL live this year, and they're very confident in their number. Obviously, I'm not trying to beat that. That's just some stuff I've heard about. Other operators, especially some of your smaller operators, if you play at home with like a local bookie or something like that, they may have live lines that are extremely exploitable, especially if you have spots that have live lines that have exploitable derivative lines. So alternate lines, alternate totals, first half. Some books even hang live player props, and the limits are pretty low on those, but depending on your bankroll, it may not actually be low to you, and those are pretty exploitable. Not on the level to let you quit your job, but on a level to maybe get you some Christmas gifts. So things I like to look for, right? I like to look for a couple things. One, I may go into a game with like a situational betting strategy. So if I know that a team is really pretty adept at converting passing downs, then I'm going to bet on that team when they get in bad spots, because the computer, which is generating a new line after every snap, is going to say, okay, spread was this, totals this, time remaining is this, current yards, current score are this and that. And they're now in 3rd and 8. Well, I'm going to bet on that team every time they get in 3rd and 8 if I know that they have the ability to play above like the national average or whatever the computer is thinking for them on passing downs, for instance. You can also bet against teams that are just absolutely terrible when they get behind the sticks, right? You can also take a look at success rate in game and finishing drives in game. For instance, if teams are driving a whole lot and are not actually scoring, but they normally do finish drives off in the red zone, or on the flip side, if teams are driving a lot and they are scoring, but they typically are not good red zone finishing drive type teams, and the defenses normally have that, I want to actually bet against what has happened in the game, because I think that's probably mostly variance, and I'm going to trust the team's track record that has been going into the game. Does that make sense? Just let me know in the chat. Make sure you hit the thumbs up here too. But I think betting against what you have seen in the game is oftentimes important. People get too wrapped up in what is happening in the actual game, and they sometimes ditch what has happened in the prior 6 or 7 games. And I am almost always going to care more about what has happened in the prior 6 or 7 games, unless what I'm seeing has what I would term, and I'm going to steal this from my friend Joe Sheehan, who has a great baseball newsletter. If you guys, if you guys want to follow that, I subscribe to. I think it's great. It's $100, I think, or maybe $50 a year. Anyway, I expense it, but like I love his writing style. I think he does a really good job. But he uses a term called signature significance, and Joe basically describes it as something that is so important that it supersedes other things, or that it does not actually need to have a huge sample set in order to be valid. For instance, like if Tom Brady got knocked out of the game, well, I don't really need to wait to see how the Bucs are going to play without him. I'm going to have to adjust my number immediately, right? If you're just paying attention to games, especially if you pay for cable and you don't pay for like a streaming service, cable is going to be faster. Typically, they're sometimes they are 4 to 5 seconds faster. And personally, like I have a streaming service throughout my house, and then in my office, I pay for cable because I want to have it faster on my TV, and I'm going to make that money back live betting, probably in just one night for my cable bill for the month, right? If I can be watching one game and see a quarterback get knocked out, boom, I made my cable bill back. So doing that is actually, I think, pretty, is pretty smart. See other things, betting against, like firing unders when teams have had pick sixes or fumble sixes or kickoff return touchdowns, basically events that are unlikely to happen again. Sometimes some of the softwares adjust a little bit too much, and I think you can have an edge there, especially if your overall cap of the game suggests that it's an under game. I wouldn't buy a computer the other night, but I would be firing live unders in that UNLV Nevada game after they had, I think, 3 defensive scores or special teams / defensive scores in that ball game. Again, those are somewhat like interceptions are not totally random. Fumbles are kind of random. Kickoff return touchdowns, somewhat random. But fumble sixes, pick sixes, things like that have a lot of noise in them, and they're not really repeatable skill. Otherwise, Bama would lead the nation in pick sixes and fumble sixes every year because they had the best players, and they simply don't do that because there's quite a bit of randomness associated with that. All right, I'm going to try to reward some of the people who got here and dropped it early and hit that nice thumbs up, but also want to reward some people who have just joined, and we welcome you all to the chat. Peter Milano wants to know what goes into making your numbers every week, and how could one start if they wanted to create your own system? Well, I can go into it some. Like, I'm not going to give away the secret sauce, right? I mean, I don't know. That's probably kind of braggadocious. I don't think I have a secret sauce. I just have my own special blend of herbs and spices. So it's mostly math-based, right? That is gambling. It's math. It cannot just be gut feel. I do make my own numbers. I use inputs from several power ratings, and I weight them differently at different times of the year because I feel like they capture different elements of the market. Then I have different weightings for each team based on, and this is very subjective, but it's something that I think does give me either an edge or, if I'm wrong on it, a detriment. But it's something that I don't think other people are going to replicate quite the same way. I have different weightings for different coaches and different teams. And then I also try to stay on track of injuries as much as possible. And I put out my injury crowdsourcing thread on Twitter every Saturday. Hey, did you see any injuries today you think could impact the line? And I love you all as the audience because you guys help me out with this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to capture all of that. And look, I'm certainly not perfect. Right. The guys setting these numbers are really good. I think the numbers this year, the openers have probably been better than ever. But the issue is the openers are still soft. And you know, it's if you are in charge of setting openers for a book, right? You may have other duties going on a Sunday. And ultimately, the NFL is the cash cow for these books. It just is. So they may not care quite as much about how accurate their openers are. They're going to say, okay, we're going to set a max bet on an opening total of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000, depending on where you play. And that's just not that huge of a bet at most places, especially not compared to what they'll take on NFL and live NFL and second half NFL and anybody who's dealing like live player props and things like that, where you have to have a lot of your attention. So again, I would like to be perfect. I won't be perfect. My only goal really is to just be better than the books. And I think college football is an easier market to beat than the NFL. And so that's why I focus on doing that. And I'm just trying to get ahead of those numbers and get positive movement in my factor or in my favor more often than not. And last week I did. It was good. I think I had positive movement on 27 of 31 wagers and had a losing week. I didn't have the magnitude of moves that I wanted. In prior weeks, we had bigger moves, but directionally, I was certainly more correct than not, meaning the numbers moved in my favor, albeit slightly in some cases, uh, far more often than they moved against me. And that's really what I want to see, is that they are continuing to move in my favor. All right, let's go ahead and we need a super chat. Yeah, I'll look into that. That'd be pretty cool. I do have Tip Jar on Twitter. If you guys follow me on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3, you can hit me on the tip jar if you learn something from me, or if you just want to be real kind or something like that. That's pretty cool. No obligation to do so, of course. I should probably change my name back from Pole Assassin. That was I don't know. I got a kick out of that, but I'm a dad, so that may just be a dad joke thing. Cool. Bud, what would you make UGA A&M and UGA Bama if they played today? That's a really interesting question. So I would make UGA minus 2.4 against Alabama on a neutral right now, and UGA A&M on a neutral field. So I have actually adjusted UGA up slightly from what my system normally has, because I do think they have somewhat found something with the new quarterback. And how much should you factor in those 3 quarters against Colorado, the game against A&M, or the game against Arkansas, and the game against Mississippi State? Certainly those have to matter. They cannot be ignored. But I do think that the change in offense for them is significant enough. And it feels like Jimbo has found a newfound confidence level with them that I have given them somewhat of a bump. Not a huge bump. I'm not overreacting. I'm not removing those games against Colorado, Arkansas, and Mississippi State, because they do matter, and those flaws could resurface. But I think Jimbo and Calzada have a greater comfort level with each other now. And I think if you don't adjust A&M up a little bit, you might end up being short in your number. I hope that makes some sense on that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that one. I would actually make Georgia 9.9 over A&M on a neutral field, which actually, yeah, and maybe I should move up A&M more. Like now that I said that out loud, would I want to lay 9.9? I probably would lay that with Georgia, actually. I think Georgia's defense is a good bit better than Alabama's defense, and I think Georgia probably could make A&M and Calzada look like Mississippi State and Arkansas and Colorado made him look. So yeah, 10. And if I had to pick it, I would go ahead and probably side with Georgia. But then again, here's the deal: if you make your own numbers and then you say, "What would I make this?" you really shouldn't feel super confident about taking either side in that game, because otherwise it suggests one of your numbers is probably wrong, right? There's some gut feel in that, and there's also some matchup stuff. Like that's purely power numbers. And early in the week, my bets are almost all power numbers based. Some of the later in the week stuff is more matchup specific after I'm able to get more data with that, because it just takes longer to compile and I don't have unlimited time, a Sunday morning to Sunday, like lunchtime. And that's when I really grind and get my early week edge. But this is a good question from Adam Lee, who is a frequent guest or frequent commenter on the show, and I appreciate he's back today. He says, "Hey, how do you predict or anticipate that a number will move in your favor?" It's a really good question, Adam. I think you have to understand what kind of adjustments you have made to your numbers, manually or otherwise. You have to be able to intuit some of the adjustments that you have made that the market may not have made. And you also just need to pay attention to how certain teams move and realize, okay, I am short on this team against the market. And a lot of people like to bet this team, right? And for that reason, I'm going to wait on this. Or maybe you think, hey, this number is, X, right? And I actually have 3 points before I get to the next biggest power number, if it moves one way. But I only need to get one more point in my favor to get it up to this key number on the other direction. So in that case, it's not really an anticipation of a move, but rather acceptance of the risk that the number may move, and you need to basically alert it in your system to where, hey, if it moves, and there are line services out there that can do this for you, if it starts to go against you, then you bet it before it gets all the way down to that key number that you want to take. KG says, how do you evaluate box scores, and does that factor into your power numbers? Well, it absolutely does. Yes, I go through all the box scores on Sunday, and I try to find plays that really impacted the game and actually watch them. If you use YouTube TV, I pull that up here in my office and switch off from the cable. And excuse me. I try to figure out, okay, some of these most impactful plays, were they fluky? Were they not? Did the team, quote unquote, earn it? Because sometimes games do happen where fluky stuff happens. I didn't really downgrade Florida following the Kentucky loss. They committed 15 penalties, so that was concerning. But they also had a kick blocked for a touchdown, and that's really not a repeatable play. That's a fluky thing that happens, unless you're going to tell me Kentucky's really good at blocking kicks and returning them for touchdowns, which I don't think that's the case. So box score stuff that I care about. Yards per attempt for the quarterback, adjusted yards per attempt, just quick little math formula on that. Take off 45 yards for each interception thrown is a decent little thing to do there. I like to look at first half, second half rushing stats to figure out, did the team win because they rushed well, or did the team just start to rush the ball well after they got the lead? There is a difference there, obviously, although there's some benefit to being able to run the ball in the second half to salt away a lead. I like to look at yards per play margin, success rate margin. I also really like to look at explosive play and success rate differential. And I know this is getting pretty nerdy here, and these are all Connolly stats, which obviously, like being friends with Bill, is very helpful. But if you look at their explosive plays versus their success rate, unless they have a track record of consistently being much more explosive than their success rate indicates they should be, I am likely to rack up, or to kind of note that this was probably a bit of a fluky offensive performance. But you have to understand how teams operate too. There are some teams, for instance, Pitt is almost always going to allow a higher explosive play rate relative to success rate than they probably should. And that's because Pitt kind of sells out to get stops, and in exchange, they will give up some of those bombs, as you saw against Miami. And that's something that's that's something that's interesting. Let me see here. Other questions. You guys want to talk a little bit of playoff stuff? We can do that. Who do you all think is going to be the playoff tonight when it comes out? I'm kind of curious. I don't know. I'm thinking about some of this stuff, and I don't know. Like, is it boring to y'all to just guess who's going to be in the playoff and who's not? I feel like we already did that on Sunday night. I know we got a couple questions about it here in the chat. I had something earlier though. Let's talk about games that are going to be the most impactful going forward. That's something I actually want to talk about, and we won't have a time to talk about that probably on Wednesday. Most people in the chat think that there will be some kind of combination of Georgia, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Cincy, Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Mississippi, or Michigan State, not Mississippi State, Lord. Georgia, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Oregon over Ohio State, not because I'm a Duck, says Adam. So is Oklahoma, do they have a better resume than Cincinnati right now? Like, that's the one that I think should start out low. And then if you're the committee, you have a ready-made excuse to bump them up. They have Baylor, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and then the Big 12 championship to finish out. That's 4 great data points. They're getting their guys back, Colin Kennedy told me, from injury. The guys we talked about being out for the last 3 weeks and who were hurt, in most of them, I think, in Red River and then TCU game. Oklahoma's been playing down 3 or 4 defensive back starters for about a month. They're getting those dudes back. I would not have Oklahoma that high right now. I would have Oklahoma, shoot, maybe 7th. Now, they might get in tonight's ranking. To me, they really don't have better wins than Cincinnati does right now. Like, they're undefeated, but Cincinnati beat Tulane by more than Oklahoma did. Cincinnati's win by multiple scores at Notre Dame is a lot better than any win than Oklahoma has right now. Oklahoma struggled with Kansas. That's a bad data point right there. What is Oklahoma's best win? Is it Kansas State by 6 on the road? It's not TCU. Is it Texas? A 4-4 Texas team? Look, I know Oklahoma gets the benefit of the doubt in the committee's eyes, or I assume they will, because their brand is Oklahoma. And look, man, if Oklahoma runs the table, they should be in. And if Oklahoma runs the table, they really should maybe be considered for the number 1 seed. We'll get back to that. But, there is a chance, by the way, if Georgia were to lose to Bama. Have you guys thought about this? If Georgia loses to Bama and A&M beats Auburn, there's a chance Georgia finishes the year with no ranked wins, which is the exact argument that people are already conjuring up to make against Wake Forest. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, because, like I said, I do have Georgia favored slightly over Alabama. And if Georgia shows more improvement on offense, I'm going to move them up even more. But Oklahoma's November here is very difficult. If they get out of that November at 13-0, they really should get number 1 consideration. But so far, their schedule has not been tough. And I'm not really seeing the difficulty of this schedule to date to justify them being a top 4 team at this moment. Now, you could argue that they're a top 4 power rating team, but if you're doing that, you are probably baking in quite a bit of preseason numbers, which for power rating purposes, I don't think is a bad move at all. In fact, like, if you guys know what you're doing, you're probably still incorporating quite a bit of preseason stuff in your power rankings. But if you look at this, Oklahoma, if you took Connolly's Resume SP Plus and ESPN's Strength of Record metric, they're 8th. Behind Wake, behind Ohio State, behind Michigan, which that's a 1-loss Michigan, behind Cincy, Michigan State, Alabama, Georgia. Larry says, what if Alabama loses to Auburn but beats Georgia in the conference championship game? Can that happen? Maybe it can. I'm trying to run through the possibilities here. Auburn has 1 conference loss right now. They lost out of conference to Penn State. I don't think. Can that happen? I don't know. Wouldn't A&M go to the conference title game? I mean, look, it's an interesting question. I don't know about that. I actually don't know that two SEC teams being in, if they're both one loss, is garbage. If Georgia lost in a game, especially a competitive game, to Alabama, I actually think their resume is good enough if you factor in the dominance that they should still be in. At this point, I think Georgia would have to lose twice to not make the college football playoff. But if you just use kind of that arbitrary round number of top 25, there is a possibility if Georgia were to lose to Bama that they would not have any top 25 wins, because Kentucky could lose this weekend in Tennessee. In fact, I think that they will. Kentucky's quarterback play in the last month has been absolutely horrendous. I mean, just arguably the worst in the SEC. They would have been better off taking knees than throwing passes against Mississippi State for much of that game, if you look at their adjusted net yards per attempt. All right, so let's talk top games for that will really decide the playoff race for the rest of the year. This weekend, I mean, there's I think 2, but probably more than that. There's probably 3 that really, really matter. So Michigan State, which is in the playoff race, they go to Purdue, and they're only favored by a field goal. Now, I bet them. I think that number is a little bit short. Purdue probably should not have beaten Nebraska over the weekend. Michigan State has to show it can handle success coming off that huge win against Michigan. Auburn and A&M are not really like serious playoff contenders, but there's a super outside shot that one of them could make it. And then Oregon and Washington. Guys, for all of the problems that Washington has had, and Jimmy Lake's comments yesterday, I feel like were not probably not well calculated, is maybe the best way that I can put that. His comments about recruiting, just not great. Still, think about this. Washington is only favored by a touchdown now? Or excuse me, Oregon's only favored by 6.5 points here. I make this number about 7. So I'm not rushing to lay 6.5 against value 7 over under 51. Has Oregon gotten any better since the Ohio State game? And they outplayed Ohio State in the shoe without KT. And straight up, I do think that has to matter. I have a thought about this, and I want to expand upon it. I don't really love using power ratings all that much for the college football playoff when we have head-to-head. If all things else are reasonably equal. If you lose at home to Oregon and you're Ohio State, and you get outplayed pretty significantly, and it's not totally fluky, and you lose when Oregon doesn't have the best player in the country on its team, I'm sorry. Those games should matter. Ohio State's going to play Michigan. They're going to play Penn State. Penn State has a couple losses already, and they beat them. They'll play Michigan State. But, man, I got to tell you, I think the Oregon win should carry weight, unless it's not close, right? I mean, if the power ratings show that, hey, this team has collapsed down the stretch and just has been super lucky to win a bunch of games, okay, I would entertain an argument there. But if the power numbers are relatively close, if they lined up and played tomorrow, would Ohio State be a 50-point favorite over Oregon? Would it be a 2-touchdown favorite over Oregon on a neutral field? I mean, it's possible that it would actually, but we got to see how it plays out. Oregon has had that really, really disappointing loss to Stanford, but their offensive coordinator had to go to the hospital for emergency surgery. So that sucks. Does the committee take that into account? Possibly, I guess. They played a very non-impressive game against Cal. They were not very impressive against a dreadful Arizona team. And I actually don't think that they were unimpressive against Colorado. They scored the ball well against Colorado. The offense seems to be improving a little bit. But I just think if they finish 12-1 conference champs, and Ohio State finishes 12-1 conference champs, I really don't think that the power rating should supersede what happened on the field, especially because it was in Columbus It was close, but not like crazy close. And it was without Oregon's best player. To me, this is how we keep more people involved in a sport that we love. If we just default to I think the variance is good for the sport, is what I'm saying. If we just default to who are the best teams, it is actually more likely that the teams that win the games are not likely to make it as often because random losses do happen. And I think that teams missing playoff games sometimes is actually good for the sport under the 4-team format because it keeps hope alive for a team like Oregon. Imagine Oregon going to Ohio State, winning that game, going 12-1. Okay, they had a slip up. It was an overtime game. Their offensive coordinator was in the hospital with emergency surgery. And I think it'd be great for the sport if Ohio State got left out this year because they lost a game at home to Oregon. Now, maybe that'll make ADs less likely to schedule these big non-conference games, but I kind of doubt it. I think 70 inches of TV, air conditioning, and cold beer at the house makes people reluctant to go to some of these bye games and buy a season ticket package for all 8 home games. I think you need to load that thing up with more intriguing matchups. I just think it is good for teams to miss out on the playoff if they lose. And I think we need to see more teams, if possible, at least get a ticket to the dance. Now, would Oregon get smoked? Possibly. Would that rob us of a matchup that I do want to see of Ohio State against Georgia's defense? Yeah. And that would suck. But I want to reward who actually wins the games. I do think that matters. Now, in a situation where like this team lost to this team and this team lost to that team, and you kind of have a little bit more roundabout logic, we need to go ahead and use the power ratings more. And we shouldn't totally ignore the power ratings. And I think the resume ratings are also really important. I think the best way to do this is to consider head-to-head. I don't really care about the conference championship or not conference championship type thing. I think it's just an extra element that they lean on as a crutch. Mostly care about strength of record, also care about dominance some. But if those numbers are kind of close at all, I think you need to tip your cap to the team that went on the road and got the dub. All right, other big games that will impact the playoff. Let's go ahead and continue with this. And then I'm probably going to jump about 12:30, 12:35. I have some meetings I have to get to later, so I'm going to have to eat some lunch at some point. Has anybody in Florida used the new Hard Rock app, by the way? Kind of curious as to what kind of limits y'all are getting, and if you've been limited at all, or has anybody had any kind of that stuff go on. All right, so next weekend, though, I think is a fantastic weekend. So we have Oklahoma, Baylor. We have NC State at Wake Forest, which, again, if Wake Forest runs the table, their remaining strength of schedule right now per ESPN is 14th. I tell you what, man, if Wake Forest runs the table, they're going to get in. Like I don't think an undefeated Wake Forest gets left out because their strength of record metric, which the committee historically, now look, that's not all the time, right? We don't really know what the new committee members will do, and I don't want to speak in absolutes here. We don't really know what's going to happen with that, right? But traditionally, they do lean on strength of record quite a bit. If Wake Forest runs the table and goes 13-0 and wins the ACC, strength of record is going to have them well within the top 4. Pretty sure. Now, they're dogs this weekend against UNC. They may or may not be home dogs to NC State. I kind of doubt it. But that's going to be a pretty damn big weekend as well coming up. Michigan State also plays Penn State coming up. Michigan State, Ohio State in week 12. Obviously, SMU, Cincy. I think you can argue, by the way, that SMU losing to Houston may be better for Cincy because Cincy does have an opportunity now to play 2 ranked teams in the final 2 weekends, as opposed to playing the same team twice in a row, right? Which they would have to do with Cincy with SMU, because Cincinnati does not actually play Houston in the regular season. So Houston winning, maybe getting ranked, to stay ranked. It's possible that Cincy could then claim they had 2 ranked wins at the time of the game in back-to-back weekends to finish off the year. All right, a little chaos playoff scenario here from Alex Crazy, aptly named. 13-0 Michigan State, 13-0 Wake, 13-0 Cincinnati, 12-1 Oklahoma State. Alex, let me know in the chat. Are we assuming that? Well, we have to because Oklahoma State already has a loss, so clearly, like they would be the conference champion too. Man, I don't know. That's like, which team do you keep a team out to put in? Are we assuming who wins the SEC in this scenario, Alex? Let me know in the chat. But that would be tremendous. Adam follows up to my thing about ranking at the time of the game feels irrelevant. Adam, I think your point is valid normally, but I do think that ranking at the time of the game, because it is so contemporaneous with the final weeks of the year, like if you tell me ranking in week 13 and then ranking a conference championship game, and then they may not finish ranked, but like they were just ranked last week by the committee, that is something that I think probably will hold some weight. In Alex's scenario here, first of all, this is not very likely, obviously, but it would be chaos. Michigan State is very clearly in. Oklahoma State would have wins over. Let me pull this up here because I'm gonna have to figure out what their strength of record is just on the fly. Oklahoma State would have wins. They beat BYU. They beat not a very good Tulsa team. They would be adding wins down the stretch against West Virginia, TCU, at Texas Tech, and Oklahoma, and then probably Oklahoma again in the Big 12 title game. I think Oklahoma State is likely in. Wake would have a better strength of record, I'm pretty sure, than Cincinnati. Cincinnati would have the more marquee win, which is Notre Dame, assuming, of course, that Notre Dame continues to win, which is not necessarily an assumption we can make. But I think it would be surprising to see the Irish lose more than two more games, right, for the rest of the year, I would think. That's a really tough one. I actually don't know. That's a fun one. Let me think on that. Maybe we'll tackle that more on Wednesday, or maybe I'll come back to that with Twitter. Do you guys in the chat and gals have any opinion there? All right. Cool. Reggie thinks that Oklahoma State got a bad spot. I don't really think they got that bad of a spot in that game personally, but I did come away pretty impressed with Oklahoma State. And the last two performances by Iowa State, I'm just thinking about this, somewhat unimpressive. Like that West Virginia team they lost to is not very good. I thought they should handle Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State's offense is kind of trash, or was. I mean, they may be improving. I have to see about that. I have a hunch they're improving. Iowa State just not super impressive. Like they're not taking that typical October jump so far that they often do. I think this scenario would just come down to what happens in the SEC. You may handle it like this, right? You may say, hey, Oklahoma State's non-conference game in BYU or in Boise is not as good as Alabama's non-conference game, Miami. And Alabama is the SEC champion at 12-1. So Bama's in, Oklahoma State is out. Then you're going to have Georgia 12-1 against Wake 13-0 or Cincinnati 13-0 arguments. And I actually think that maybe the committee would this is the one where it really put to the test. Do you go double SEC? I don't know what they would do here. It would kind of depend, I think, on what the other SEC games shape out like. I will say I think the SEC does need Ole Miss. If it wants to get two teams in, it's not impossible, but it would increase its odds of getting two teams in if Ole Miss does not screw around this weekend and lose to Liberty, which is a game that clearly means a whole lot to Hugh Freeze, and probably a little bit less meaning to Oklahoma, or excuse me, to Ole Miss. All right. I will talk to y'all next Tuesday, and I'll be back on Wednesday and, of course, Thursday Locks Pod. Terrible week of Locks Pod for me last week, by the way. I went 1-5, so that sucks. Not nearly as good as the column, but I went 9-1 the week before. So, yeah, pretty, I guess, decent returns here. 10-6 last 2 weeks, and it's small sample size theater anyway. The rest of the guys killed it though, so it was good to have them pick me up, and we are net positive as a group for the season, both in against the spread and money line plays. So, yeah, if you can have a show that gives good entertainment and also throw some winners out there and enjoys it, cool. We'll see y'all then. Appreciate it. Thumbs up for the video. Make sure you turn those notifications on. Who knows? It's coach firing season. We will definitely have quite a bit of coach firing and hiring stuff coming up. A little bit of recruiting talk. Going to have some guests on as well from the recruiting side of things, so we can chop it up there. Talk a little bigger trends. Maybe not so much the nitty gritty. And we'll see y'all next time.